Hey, good people. This is Jay Artis-Wright with Freedom to Choose Schools, and you are joining another episode of Choice Words, a podcast by Freedom to Choose Schools, where we dive into what are those options in our educational system that are out there that we should be aware of, what leadership is doing to create those options, who's in that leadership, and ultimately, how is it impacting our students? Today, we are further exploring conversations around options with a deeper dive into homeschool. And we are joined by Elan Page, who is the founder of Homeschool Our Way, who is going to talk to us about her homeschool experience with her daughter, but also about her organization. And more importantly, there's a unique I won't say twist, but I think a unique blend here that we want to talk about, which is Elan specifically helps families of color explore their homeschool options, which I'm excited to just talk with her and ask tons of questions about that as someone who's actually thought about pursuing homeschool for my children myself. So, with that, I want to dive right in. Elan, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Jay.
Of course, of course. So, Elan, Homeschool Our Way, you discovered this a little bit after COVID, to my knowledge. And it was a decision that you and your husband have been mulling around for a while, and you decided to finally take the dive. Help our guests understand, like, what was the driving force behind that, and tell us a little bit more about how you landed in that space.
Well, you're exactly right. COVID was really the catalyst for us. So my oldest, who's 11 now, she was in kindergarten at the time when, kind of the whole world shut down and the kids had to come home from school. And what we noticed is so her teacher was doing the absolute best that she could to do virtual classes with 5-year-olds because I know that that was certainly a challenge for her. But what we were noticing is that our daughter would finish her work way ahead of her classmates. And she'd kind of sit there and kind of be bored. She'd want a snack. She'd want to kind of walk around and whatever. And we started to think, okay, wait a minute. If this is happening at home, was this happening in the classroom as well? And it was. And so we started to really think, I think quietly, both my husband and myself separately, we started to think, well, what if we like moved into next school year with homeschooling as opposed to sending them back into at the time what was the unknown, with schools, maybe not taking covid precautions, that kind of thing. We were like, well, what if we kept them at home and like homeschooled them ourselves? And so ultimately we made the decision over the summer. And at the time then we had our younger daughter was I think 3, and she was already showing signs of really being curious, wanting to learn, that kind of thing. So we were like, okay, well, so let's do it. Let's, with the two of them, let's do a preschool curriculum. Let's do a then first grade curriculum for our older daughter. And it really turned out successfully. They really thrived. They thrived at being able to go at their own pace. We got to explore some, different subjects that we don't always get to explore so much in traditional school, Black history being one of them. We could go as deep as we wanted to. We could do it anytime we wanted to. It didn't have to be, kind of relegated to February. So we really had a good time with it. Now, I am a working mom. So the challenge was not so much the kids and their learning, it was making it work around my work schedule. So we ended up going back to traditional school for a couple of years because in my mind I was like, well, I'm too busy. There's no way I can do both of these at the same time. Then I started to learn more and to make some changes, and even my work situation made some changes. They hired another me, which kind of lessened the workload a little bit, but we figured out some ways to really make it work again, and we returned back to homeschooling, and we've been doing it ever since.
Well, that is really good. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
First, congratulations for successfully navigating through COVID with a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old.
I
Like,
mean, that was something.
I was definitely something because I remember my children and looking forward to them being able to be handed off to somebody else for a little while so that I, especially being a working mom, could return back to what I thought would be normalcy. So we
Normalcy,
all
yeah.
had we all had a hard shock when we had to go into COVID mode. And impressive to hear that not only did you go into it, but you thrived and made something even more out of it. So let's talk a little bit more about that. So why homeschool? Why, I will tell you from my experience, I was so ready for my girls to go back to school. I was like, homeschool never. Get them in a class. But I will say there were moments, there were glimpses of, oh wow, we can go to the zoo and we can do exploratory learning where, where you're not just sitting here looking at a book, that I was like, this is kind of cool. And I still incorporate that a lot into who they are now as seventh and ninth graders. So there's definitely some value there. Curious to know though, for two working parents with young kids, why homeschool?
So I took a test several years ago with my team at work. It's called the Strengths Finders test. And my top strength is learner. Apparently I just love learning. And so I think that in me connected with the learning that was happening with my kiddos. I enjoyed the process. I enjoyed figuring out how and what they could learn. I enjoyed seeing the light bulb moments, seeing, the things click for them. I enjoyed, you just said it just a minute ago, exploratory learning with them, hands-on learning, being able to have discussions. And even now, the discussion part of what we do as a family is really, really important. It's not just read this book and answer these questions on paper. It's let's talk about it. Let's talk about what it means. What, if it's history, how we can apply it to, today. If it's literature, what are some of the themes that we're looking at? Like all the things. I get to do that with my kiddos. And again, they're only at this point, what, 8 and 11, but we get to go deeper, I think, than perhaps their traditional school counterparts can go because we have the time and we have the space to do so. And I have 2 students as opposed to, 25 students. So we can really cater the learning to them. And I think that that's been an exciting feature for me for with homeschooling.
Yes, indeed, it is. And I actually, just to give a note to my daughter who is 14, I was like, oh, like maybe we should try homeschooling. And she just side eyed me so fast and was like, I do not want to be homeschooled. Like, what are you talking about? Which leads me to the segue of why you're so passionate about helping families of color access homeschooling. Talk to us about maybe some of the things that are we've got to demystify about homeschooling and who does it and who doesn't and why, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So let me validate your daughter's side eye because it is something that if you would ask me at this point, what is this, 5, 6 years later, if you would ask me then, well, what about homeschooling? I'd have been like, side eye,
Right.
just like
Side
your
eye,
daughter, right?
seriously, right,
Yes,
uh-huh. Mhm.
absolutely. And here's why. When I was growing up, and I was born and raised in Dallas, or in a suburb of Dallas, and I went to a smaller private Christian school. It was mostly white families at the Christian school, and we had. And I said that for a reason. Give me a second.
Mhm. I got you.
I,
Mhm.
we had homeschool families that were able to come and take specific classes with us. So maybe their electives, they were able to participate in sports with us, be on the basketball team with us, that kind of thing. And so I got a chance to see homeschooling, but that homeschooling never resonated with me ever because for two reasons. Reason A, I too had two working parents. My parents got up every morning, dropped us off. One was an entrepreneur, one worked for the same company for 30 years before she retired. And that was all I saw. And that was all I knew. I didn't know stay at home mom life. And so in my mind, when I would see these stay at home mom families homeschool, that already told me, oh, well, that doesn't apply to you and your family. That's not something that y'all do. I also never saw anybody who looked like me homeschooling. I promise you, I was a grown, functioning adult before I ever saw families of color homeschooling. And it was around the time of COVID when we're all kind of being thrown into the deep end, with virtual learning and all of the things that I started to really see this homeschool community with families of color emerge. And I was like, wait a minute, we out there. What do you mean?
Mhm. Yeah.
So
Mhm.
I got really excited about it. And I started to see some of the reasons, some of the similarities among us, especially for the reasons why we were choosing to homeschool. It's one thing to be forced into something, during COVID. It's quite another thing to make the choice and say, no, not this, but this. And so for these families who are choosing homeschooling, a lot of times with the white families that I remember growing up with, it was a religious reason most of the time. For many of our families, now I'm a Christian woman, but my reasons for homeschooling are not faith related. They're not faith based. It's not that I don't teach my kids our faith, but it is that it's this homeschooling thing is broader than that for me.
Mhm.
So again,
It's not the
be
center of it. Yeah. Mhm.
yes,
Mhm.
exactly. My
Mhm.
children being able to learn at their own pace, that's one of the big things. And I think that for parents, no matter where your kids are, if they are, perhaps neurodivergent kids, well, yes, you want your kids to be able to not only learn at their own pace, but learn in their own way so that the information resonates with them. So I see a lot of that with our families. And then I also see being able to teach our kids the things that are important to our families, whatever that might be. So you can put faith in there. You can also put culture, history, those types of things. And so I think that those things are important. I've seen that they're important for Black families. And so because we approach it in that way, I'm able to kind of step in and help families access resources that will make that happen for them. So if they're looking for cultural resources, being able to connect them with that. If they're looking for resources that will allow them to, teach their neurodivergent child in a way that resonates with them, I'm able to connect them with those types of resources. And most important, and I think that this might be where your 14-year-old was coming from, community is so big. It's huge. My kids are not short on community. They are not short on classmates. They are not short on friends and being able to see their friends and activities and all of the things. In fact, I've had to cut back because mama was tired. And
Right.
so, yes, and so I think that yes, it looks different because it's not me dropping them off in one singular place Monday through Friday. But it is, okay, on Mondays, we go here and we meet up with our classmates here. On Tuesdays, we, see this group of people. On Wednesdays, we do this. On third, and so on. And so again, it looks different, but at the end of the day, they still have their friends, they still have their peers, they still have their community. They have people that they see consistently and are able to learn with and do life with. And so they're not missing out on that piece either.
You are speaking a lot to, I think the next question was going to be about the fear of isolation, because you kind of just named it. A lot of people, there is a stigma, and you named some of the stigmas, that it's a very radical Christianized type of way of looking at homeschooling. Majority of just white families do it. There's also this image of white rural families who actually don't have access to transportation, so they have to do it for other reasons. And all those do exist, but there's also a growing pot that exists of exactly what you just named: working mothers, working families who are finding ways to use community, and who are also people of color. And we've had several of them on our show. So thank you for joining that network.
Yay, I'm amongst good company.
Right, you're amongst good company, and it's good for people to see these faces so that we can debunk those stereotypes, because it is definitely a stereotype that, again, I grew up with as well. That is really unfair in some instances, because on the other hand, what I'm learning even more, also being a learner, is how exciting it is and how far advanced. We had recently someone on who was a homeschooler who graduated from high school at like 13, because she didn't have to have all those hours allotted in for adult issues. It was just strictly about learning in her pace, at her rhythm, and she was able to excel. um, I want to ask, so let's say we have parents right now who are listening, parents of color specifically, who are listening and saying, okay, well, I get it that homeschooling can happen. I get it that you're a working family. What are some of those gaps that you feel like, what are some other gaps that are out there that parents need to hear about, and how do we fill those gaps for them?
I think that first and foremost, thinking that you have to come up with all of the things and that you have to teach all of the things is a misconception. And especially as a working mom, I think it's important to, for me, to reveal very transparently, it's a village for me. I don't teach all of the things, not in the least. I have virtual teachers for my kiddos for specific classes. So this and it changes. It could change from semester to semester or year to year. So for right now, my daughter's math classes and their Spanish classes are taught virtually. So they're in a class with other students, or they're in a one-on-one situation in their Spanish class with a teacher in Mexico City, and she gets on with them, yeah, once every couple weeks, and they do their lessons, and then we get a chance to practice and reinforce in between. So there are those opportunities. There's also, you mentioned, like, what did this look like however many years ago when we were coming up versus what it looks like now? And you're correct. There are so many more resources and so many more things that we have access to that we didn't maybe even 10, 15, 20 years ago. And one of those things is the not only the virtual class, like the live virtual classes, but then there's also the on-demand, classes and the on-demand learning. And so I set my kiddos up, they're probably in the other room finishing up right now their science lesson, their language arts lessons, because they do those on the computer. The lessons are there. They're able to digest the lessons at their own pace. They're able to dig into some of the work. And then I'm able to come behind and reinforce these things. We're able to sit down together. I mentioned, maybe in their literature class, we're able to discuss the themes of the particular book that they read. Or if it's grammar, we're able to, okay, well, so give me examples of prepositions. Like, tell me how to use those. And, one time we even with prepositions, we went to the park and I had them act out all of the prepositions. Okay, well, so we're going,
Oh, in the law.
yeah, we're going down the
Yeah,
slide. We're
yes,
going
yes,
over the, whatever.
yes.
And that was so much fun to them.
That's
So
actually
again,
how I
that kind of,
remember learning prepositions, was like
yes,
exactly that way. Yeah, that's really
I
cool. I
love
like
that.
about that. Uh-huh. Mhm.
Yeah, no, so it was a lot of fun. So that though is me being able to I call it outsourcing. Me being able to outsource some of the teaching allows me to really be a part of the learning process, not necessarily the teaching process. And I think that for every family, you find your balance, right? Like you might be able to teach all of the things, and that's fantastic. Or you may have very little bandwidth to teach all of the things, but you can still be involved in the learning in whatever ways that you can. At the end of the day, though, as parents, we are still the architects of the learning. And I think that that is what some people fail to really understand. Like, the difference is, um, the being the architect of the learning versus being the doer of all of the teaching. Those are two very different things. So I think it's important to distinguish those.
I like that analogy, like the architect of learning. And you're right. In some cases, the parents are also learning along with their children.
Oh
Um,
yeah, and it's fun.
it's fun. It is so fun, and I have learned so much from my kids that I mean, I didn't really have a great high school education. I think before high school, I had a good education. But what's interesting, I'm like, man, I feel a little bit slighted here. Like I don't remember learning what you are learning now in the ninth grade or in the seventh grade. And so they teach me stuff, and my 13-year-old loves fun facts. Fun fact, mom, did you know this? Did you know that? So it's always a great
She's
experience.
my kind of people. I like that.
Well, I'll send you a book. We actually every year we get this book and we keep it in our car because we road trip a lot, and it's like
Uh-huh.
all these fun facts, like 5,000 fun facts that you should know about. And she
Oh, we'll
constantly,
eat it up. Please do send me that.
yeah, I will. So I want to pivot a little bit because you also, there's two questions that come to mind for me. The first is curriculum development, and what does that look like to what you're talking about? Like, okay, there's a structure, your kids are learning, what type of software are they using virtually? Is it something that's accessible to everyone, or is it something that you have to go through the district to get? So I want to ask you about that. And then I want to ask you about navigating the laws around homeschooling, because as a homeschooling parent, there is some accountability. You can't just do whatever you want. You do have to be accountable. Can you talk to us about those things and share with our listeners what they need to know about that?
I can. And actually, I'm going to start sort of in reverse. I'm going to start with the laws because I think that that is I have a 5-step system that I teach. It's called my START homeschooling method, and the T is for the rules matter, and the rules are the laws, your state's homeschool laws. It is very important to me. It is foundational to me to make sure that parents are equipped with understanding and knowing their state's homeschool laws before they get started with anything. It is one of the very first steps because no, first and foremost, you don't wanna get in a situation where you get further down the line and you realize you've been doing it wrong, and then you have to backtrack. You also don't wanna be outside of compliance because especially if you have high school kids. Okay, well, so all of a sudden, are they not going to graduate? Are they not going to get their diploma because you've been unknowingly doing it wrong? That's not a situation that anybody wants, right? So it's important to know the laws from the very beginning. And then you can create your homeschool accordingly, just really understanding the parameters. Now, in terms of curriculum, I actually don't even, I've never had to look into like a curriculum that's only available to school districts. I've never even gone that route because I mentioned it just a moment ago, there's so much available to families as homeschoolers that we can go in as family of one with our own private purchasing power, and we can go in and select the type of curriculum options that we want. We don't have to, partner with 100 other families to go buy, from this particular publisher because they only sell to districts and, large quantity purchases that way. So I will tell you with families, because a lot of times families are like, well, so where do I find, curriculum options? Where do I go for that? I've done a couple of things. And it's like a snowball. Once you sort of get started, you're able to keep going and it just gets bigger. One of the places that I like to start is in local Facebook groups, or actually, it doesn't even have to be local, but Facebook groups that are specific to homeschool families. You can find your flavor, right? There are faith-based homeschool groups. There are faith-based homeschool groups for families of color. There are Facebook groups for homeschoolers with
LGBTQIA.
middle schoolers, all kinds of things.
Mhm, mhm.
Find your flavor, get into those groups, and you can either start asking questions or you can just type it into the chat because I guarantee that somebody or type it into the search because I guarantee that a family has already put in, you know what, I really like such and such a curriculum. You should totally use this. People are willing to share, especially in these Facebook groups. They're absolutely willing to share. And I've gotten some really strong recommendations that way. Now, me personally, what I like to do is I keep a running spreadsheet with a list of curriculum options. Every time I see somebody recommend something, or maybe sometimes, like I'm scrolling on Facebook or whatever, an ad might be served to me, and I might think, oh, okay, that kind of looks cool. We don't need it now, but let me put it on the list just in case we ever have to refer back to it. I keep a list. And the reason why this is important is because in a situation like what we literally had this school year, this second semester, I didn't love the language arts curriculum that my older daughter was using first semester. We needed to pivot for second semester. I don't ever wanna have to be in a situation where I'm having to start from scratch and, "Oh my gosh, what am I gonna do? Where am I even gonna find, this?" I could just go to my trusty spreadsheet and find another one and roll with that. And the other thing I do love about homeschooling is you have the freedom to pivot when needed. You don't have to stick with a curriculum just because. You don't have to ride out the rest of the semester just because. If it's not working for your child, you can cut your losses and you can move on to something else that works better for them. So I know I said a lot, but basically, again, curriculum is available to us as homeschool families. We can purchase it directly, and I think it's wise to always know sort of what your options are just in case you need to pivot. But these sort of firsthand recommendations that you can get in Facebook groups, I think are the place to start.
That's good. So start within the Facebook groups. But you mentioned something that I was going to ask you about next, and that is start and what you do specifically with Homeschool Our Way, where people can also connect with you and you can walk them through this. So what is start? Tell us the other parts of that of the acronym of start.
It's a 5-step acronym. The S is for setting your family's vision and goals. It's important to know first and foremost what does your family want to get out of this? What do you guys want to accomplish? Because no matter who you are and how old your kids are and where you live in the country, like whatever, you're probably making the switch or at least considering the switch to homeschooling for a reason. So so really dig into that reasoning. What does your family want to get out on the other side? So starting with the family vision and goals. The second piece we talked about is knowing your state's homeschool laws specifically. That is extremely important. It's extremely foundational. And of course, I went through the reasons why. The next step is curriculum. And we talked about that too. For me, curriculum is not just a, oh, well, yeah, let's run to, such and such a store and buy some books and let that be the end of it. No, you really have to figure out your child's learning style and what will work for your family and what your priorities are. If you want, a faith-based curriculum, or if you want something that is going to be very culturally in tune with your family, all those types of things, you should take that into account. And again, you should take into account the type of learner that your child is. If your child is not really one of those that just loves the paper and pen, okay, well, don't force that down their throat. You can find other options that really will work better for them because you're wanting to work with their learning style, not against it. The next piece, STA. The
We're on
next piece,
R.
what's that?
We would be on R and T. So R and
Thank
then
you. So yeah, so the next step is R for respect the whole child. The reason why I say this is because for me, homeschooling is not all about just the ABCs, the one, two, threes. It's really about nurturing that whole child. So, what are your kids into? What are their passions? What are their interests? What are the things that make them light up? So whether that's art, whether that's dance, whether that's music, whether that's STEM and science, whether that's theater, whatever that might look like, here's your opportunity. Here's your opportunity to really dive into it. My kiddos are in a homeschool theater group. We would have never had time for separate theater. And I know this because my kids have been kind of interested in theater before we began homeschooling full time. We never really had time for it. There might be time for, maybe a theater camp here and there during the summertime, but even then our schedules wouldn't align. We might be on vacation the week that the camp was offered, that kind of thing. We have more time to put into the things that they're passionate about as we're homeschooling. So that truly is a part of our homeschool experience. It's not an extra, it's not a one-off. Really respecting the interests and the passions of your child is should be, in my mind, a part of the homeschool experience. And then the last step is T, and that is the support that you need. The whole family needs support. The parents need support from fellow homeschool families and from just the village around them. And then also the kiddos need that community. They need to be with their peers. They need to be able to have that kid experience just like everybody else. So that finding those 5 things and really solidifying those 5 things, in my mind, gets a prospective homeschool family off to a good start.
Well, Elan, thank you so much for sharing that. And just out of curiosity, I got two more questions for you. Where can listeners connect with you and learn more about the work that you're doing?
Sure. Well, I think that the easiest way is homeschoolourway.com. That's my website. I'm also on Instagram and yeah. Oh, and I'm sorry. And also my podcast of the same name is called Homeschool Our Way.
Oh, that's really cool. Homeschool Our Way. We should create a whole network with like a whole education network of podcasts because our
I would
parents.
love that, and I'm a podcast junkie, so I would eat it up me myself.
Yeah, I mean, our families, we need these types of resources and access, and it's actually one of the reasons why I was catapulted into this because it's just you realize how much there's a resource deficit and barren opportunity that we just don't know about. But then when you find out about it, it's like, oh, I didn't realize there was just this whole network out there of people who are willing to help. One of the things that constantly come up when I speak to a lot of homeschool parents is you have this community right in your neighborhood that are going to drive your kids to the theater camp, or that are going to host them up at their house for the day that they learn about science. And it just builds so much. And it does debunk that myth about the isolation where you just think that your child's out in the middle of nowhere by themselves and they have no social skills. It's actually the opposite of that, is what I'm hearing from you and that I've heard from other homeschool parents. So this has been really enlightening, and you've allowed our listeners to learn in the same capacity that you have. Being a learner and active listener today has been great. Elan, we're about to wrap up, and one of the things that we do for all of our guests is we ask a question, and it's based off of our name, which is choice words. And choice words has a double meaning. Choice words meaning, the options that you have in education, the choices that you have, but also, choice words could be, I have a few choice words for you as a listener, as a parent, as a lawmaker, whoever you want to give your choice words to. In your final seconds with our show, what are some choice words that you would like to share?
Well, I want to speak directly to families because that's kind of my wheelhouse and that's who I have a passion for. I am big on educational equity. And I am big on whatever the best education option is for you and your kiddos. That's what I want you to have. And so if homeschooling sounds like something that you're interested in, I'm happy to give you all the resources, all the tools at my disposal to help you make that happen. But if homeschooling is not an option for your family or something that you're interested in, I want you to be successful in whatever it is that you do. I'm not one of those folks who is big on pushing down, my particular preferences on anybody else. My preference is for our kids, especially black and brown kids, to have a stellar education. And that's all that matters. However, you are able to get that education is more power to you. So, again, if I can be of service, if I can be a resource, I'm happy to in the homeschooling realm. But we've done public school, we've done private school, and we've done homeschooling. I'm a fan of all three. So yeah, just educational equity. That's what's important to me.
Well, that is awesome. And that's what's important to us at Freedom to Choose Schools, as we have our national advocacy organization that is literally based off of what you just named, creating equity and access specifically for our Black and Brown students and for founders and leaders so that they understand the value and the importance that they place. So, you welcome home. You found your people. We've
I
created
love
your
finding my
network.
people.
It's always great, and it's just been such a pleasure and such a joy to talk with you. I hope our listeners have enjoyed this as much as I have. And again, for any further resources, you can go to homeschoolourway.com. Mrs. Elan Page here to give us some wisdoms about exploring options for your students, specifically for families of color, understanding how important educational equity and freedom are to us. And so, I again thank you so much for joining us, and thanks everyone for listening.